Hey everybody, how you doing? How was lunch? Now that it's not crowded, can somebody go get me a salad? No, I'm actually good. Thank you very much. It's such a great honor to be here, and we have a panel of experts who are great, going to give you great advice on hiring practices and some secrets that you may not know about. We want to start all the way on my right with Loren, and everybody come down give us a little bit about you, tell us your name and what you do, and then we're going to ask you what was a pivotal moment in your own career growth. So think about that, you other guys. So Loren, if it's up to you, introduce yourself.
Yeah, excellent. Hi everyone, I'm Loren Blandon. I head up learning, growth, and experiences at VML. VML, I'm sure no one in here has heard about VML, but we're the largest creative advertising agency in the world. We do work for some little brands you may have heard of, like Ford and Wendy's and Coca-Cola, among others. And pivotal career moment, that's really tough. I think of it more as accumulation of little, experiences that add up over time. But I think a big one, which we spoke about this morning, was in March of 2020, I was in a CPO role leading our Latin America HR function when all hell broke loose across the world. And I think, all of us that were in an HR role at the time, that was like trial by fire. We learned a ton. So I think that was probably a pivotal moment for all of us in our growth and learning.
All right, fantastic. And Jackie?
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jackie Perez. I'm Vice President of HR, supporting corporate functions, talent development, and organizational design for Lennar Homes. So I hope most of you guys have heard about Lennar Homes or know someone who has purchased a Lennar home, or maybe even some folks in here that actually live in a Lennar home. And we're one of the nation's largest home builders. And when I think about a pivotal moment in my career, I was sharing this story with some of the panelists earlier, but I go back to a moment in time when I had started my career at Target, and it was the first time I was leading a team. And I had a very small team. It was only 3 associates, and I noticed that someone on my team had a ton of potential. And I took her under my wing and really helped her grow and develop. And about a year later, I was able to promote her, and she was one of my peers. And that was a pivotal moment in time for me, because I really reflect on that moment as knowing exactly what I wanted to do, and I knew that I wanted to lead teams, and I wanted to help people grow their careers.
Awesome, that's great. And Toni, Banket?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Toni Banket. I'm the Global Head of Talent Acquisition for Edwards Vacuum. I oversee US, UK, and Asia, and my role has a span of overseeing talent acquisition, employee branding, and workforce development. So in terms of what was pivotal in terms of my career was I actually worked for a global organization, engineering in scope. It was the first time that they were going through a transformation of moving away from a decentralized model into a centralized model. And I was one of one to actually transition that organization from into a center of excellence around talent acquisition, which was pretty much heads down, eat, breathe, sleep, but it gave me the opportunity to utilize the wealth of my experience up to that point and see fruits of my labor. It was through that exercise that I actually understood that the strategy around business was really where I wanted to align myself versus just the tactical interplay. So that was a real pivotal moment for me, and I have since then had opportunities to actually be strategically aligned to the business.
Awesome, thank you. And Amy?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Amy Turner. I am the Talent Operations Leader for RSM US, which is the 5th largest public accounting firm focused on assurance, tax, and consulting services. We are based in Chicago, but 83 offices around the country, over 17,000 employees. And so in my function, I oversee our talent operations function, which is everything centralized, highly repeatable, processes and transactions from talent acquisition to workforce transactions the day you're hired to the day you retire, our HR help desk, and everything in between. And when I think about a pivotal role in my career, we were talking about this earlier, and who knew that I would go first? For me, I think it really was my first job coming out of school. I worked for a retail company. I was a young coordinator running all of corporate recruiting for a big corporate retail company. It was me and my boss, and 7 months into my job, my boss left. and we didn't backfill his role for about 7 months. And you learn to persevere, you learn to fake it till you make it, how to ask critical questions, how to not be so driven and focused on title or what somebody says your job responsibilities are, but really learning how to understand an organization, what the objectives are, how to align to those and add value, and kind of being thrown into the fire and knowing how to deliver, and then how to advocate for yourself when the fire does settle down, to make sure that you're positioned strategically and appropriately in the organization.
All right. And Brian?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks for being here. So I'm Brian Bark. I'm responsible for Aon's business operations in Florida. I'm hoping some of you have heard of us. We're a leading global professional services organization. We specialize in human capital and risk consulting. We're in 120 countries around the world, 55,000 employees, and we're the largest operation of our type in Florida. Pivotal moment for me, and it was a great story. There were a few, but I would also say it was the first job that I took in consulting. I went to work for a very small boutique consulting firm, but while the firm was small, we did really big things for really big organizations. And in a firm like that, there is no division of this or department of that. And so you get thrown into the deep end pretty quickly. And so looking back, I would credit those years as really helping my development, not only as a consultant, but eventually as a leader in professional services. So that's for me.
Awesome. Fantastic. I guess a pivotal moment for me, I won an album on a radio station and it skipped. So I went, do you remember albums? And anyway, it skipped. I brought it in to exchange it. And I was all shaking, nervous, and I asked, do you have any jobs around here? So they gave me a job, and my job was to steal traffic reports from the other stations and then go in and tell the guy on the air where the traffic slowdowns were. So got to make a living. $2.10 an hour, by the way. Loren, I wanted to go back to you because you say your role is unique. It's been transformed out of the traditional learning and development positions. How does that differ from what's normally taught?
So when I moved into the role two years ago, it was really a unique opportunity to move into kind of a bit about my dream job, really. I've always been a little bit of a feather ruffler and trying to do things differently, and never quite found myself in either the role or the industry or the space to really do it the way that I wanted to. So when this opportunity came up to lead essentially what was L&D for our agency globally, I did it with the caveat that I was going to kind of blow things up and kind of start over, which luckily my boss and just the industry, it's a creative industry, so it was welcomed. So we became LGX, and what that means is I essentially took my team and I told them we are no longer in the business of creating PowerPoint-based training. In fact, I never want to hear the word training out of this team's mouth ever again. We are now a CX practice, and our deliverable just happens to be learning and organizational design. But our methodology and our thinking is always around CX, customer experience, and human-centered design. So we really use that now as the premise of everything we do. And we really put ourselves into the seat of being learning and more experience curators, designers, and architects versus trainers. Excuse me. And that's really helped us just scale and create really meaningful, relevant experiences that help people grow. And training is kind of has become the last bit of what we do. It's been really transformative, really fun. I think that my team is doing really exciting work that they feel better about. It's better received among our audience. We've been able to create a lot more impact, thinking about how to help people grow by way of more design and experience design in the flow of work versus let's do a training on these warm and fuzzy topics, which sounded okay, but it really wasn't tying back to anything meaningful. And I see a lot of head nodding, so I'm sure that resonates with a lot of folks. So it's been an interesting ride.
Fantastic. Jackie, you established in-person orientations where folks come into corporate headquarters for 3 days, and by focusing on being together, it dropped your once high 90 turnover to a major low. And can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we're hyper-focused on at Lennar is how we improve the associate journey, right? Or different experiences along the way. So how do we attract talent, and how do we help make sure that we have the right moments that matter along that journey all the way to retirement, right? So when you think about the fact that when you join an organization, it's such a crucial moment in time, and a lot of organizations have walked away from in-person orientations, right? And so we made the decision as an organization that we weren't going to do that, right? We really want to invest in how we immerse our associates from day one into our culture and how important that is. So one of the things that we did, and we're still doing because it's a pilot, is we have all of our associates come to our corporate headquarters in Miami for orientation. So we have large groups, 50 plus associates that are all starting the same day. They go through an experience journey. Our CEO comes, speaks to them, and we take them to communities and we really engage with them from day one throughout that entire week. And we're piloting it in Miami, but we're opening up learning centers in Texas. We're opening up learning centers in California because it's such a crucial part in everybody's first day that we want to make sure we welcome them appropriately and we create that excitement that's going to create a lasting effect.
Is it like a boot camp in a way? I mean, but a fun one, obviously.
A fun boot camp.
Absolutely, everybody loves it. Well, boot camps can be good in some cases. Toni, I wanted to see if you can discuss your company's coaching and mentoring programs.
Yeah, so over at Edwards, one of the key components of our successes with regards to the associates that we have is continuous learning. It's embedded into our DNA. Part of the continuous learning is the opportunity for individuals to participate in coaching, as well as mentorship programs. Our mentorship programs are those that are actually described by a raise your hand, participating in a volunteerism to suggest that you're interested in the actual program versus someone handpicking an individual and force-fitting it into this program that's actually designed. So generally speaking, with the mentorship program, that's a longer-term solution where you're going to be developing a relationship. It's going to follow through a journey where the coaching is actually kind of a little bit more shorter term, right? So there may be individuals that are struggling with, let's say, the empowerment of utilizing culture within the organization. And if so, they would have an opportunity to be aligned to a coach that would be virtual in nature. We have a program called Coach Hub, which they have a platform virtually. You go onto the platform, you have an opportunity to pick and select an actual coach that you feel is going to be aligned to you. If you take that coach, you can attempt to go through first and second iterations, and then if you find that it's not a right fit for you, you have an opportunity to go through and actually make a second selection. So the idea there is to have someone that you trust and you value their opinion that can help you guide you through to your journey to be successful within the work environment. It's been very successful so far. We're early stages. It was implemented about 1.5 years ago, and a lot of hands raised in order to participate in the program overall.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Amy, it's an interesting space. You and I were talking about this actually before we came out, that enrollment in master's programs is down, and the supply issue in the workforce. Why are master's programming seeming to be less important to folks coming up?
So it is interesting. I think the new generation coming through school, going into 4-year degree programs, let alone master's programs, is really challenging the status quo. It's incredibly expensive to go to school. Sometimes the salaries are not necessarily keeping up, and they're weighing out their options. And so what's happening is a lot of organizations, and I see some heads here nodding, are having to really reevaluate what it takes to be successful in roles. And if you are governed by, certain bodies that require certain requirements, right? So in an accounting firm, you have to have a 4-year degree, you have to be a CPA in order to sign off on tax returns or audits. If there are requirements, we're being forced to look at alternative talent pools. But I think other organizations are also, and even in other sides of our business, we're looking at saying, is the value of a master's degree what we thought it was historically in the workplace? Are they bringing really a different level of experience or perspective? Or can we really be thinking differently about what it takes to be successful, the skills that you need in order to do that? And the reality is you're able to get that in other venues, not just in the traditional classroom setting.
Okay, thank you. What is onboarding? Does anybody want to talk about that? Onboarding?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, sure.
I think it depends on how you define it. Anybody can define it differently from before you start with an organization, the day you start with an organization. Everyone has a different duration of time, your first week, first 30, 60, 90 days. For us, it's your first year, but I think it is about how do you come into an organization, integrate people into the organization. It's no longer just how do you train somebody and get them ready to be successful and productive in their job. Onboarding is how do you bring an individual or several individuals into the organization and set them up for success in a way to not only be a contributing member in their job, but of the overall organizational culture.
Is your mic on? Oh, no.
Is it covered?
Lauren's mic.
I've heard recently too the term everboarding, with this idea that onboarding should never end. Sometimes we over-index in creating this amazing experience for folks for that first week or the first 30 days, and then it's like, whoop, then folks are looking back saying, what is there for me? I want some of what they're getting. Now it's this kind of never-ending journey.
Associate experience throughout all the different levels of the journey is so important, right? Because you have to continue to engage your associates at every point, right? So how do you create those experiences, and how do you have development opportunities so that they can feel like they own their journey, right?
Absolutely, and in moments, right, there's sort of these moments, milestone moments that matter in someone's career, and if you want them to stay, acknowledge that when they're moving from one role into the next, from one team to another, it's kind of like onboarding all over again and not neglecting those moments.
Okay. Brian, can you discuss your internship opportunities that you have at AON, bringing interns in and exposing them to various roles, rotating them back in hopes of hiring them? Is that how that works?
Yeah, that is how that works. I mean, I think, we're facing the same talent challenges every business does in professional services, right? It's all about people. And there was a recognition many years ago that, a decade out, which we're about 5 years into now, that 80% of the people who come into our industry would come from outside of our industry. There aren't a lot of people growing up saying, I want to be an insurance professional, I want to do broking, I want to be a human capital consultant. So we have to think differently about where those people come from and really what the skills are to make folks successful. So our internship program is a huge part of that. We bring in a large cohort of interns every year. We had a group this summer. It's fascinating. I take a personal interest in it because I'm interested in helping these kids in college find their way after they graduate, whatever way that is. And I think we do a really good job of not just building community around that in the office, but also a national network where they get to know each other and they get exposed, because this idea of how employee growth starts from the beginning, it really starts then. It starts in the interviews when you start to talk about, hey, you're joining an organization where you start is important, but where you end up is more important. And it doesn't have to be where you started. In an organization our size, there's so much you can do. And it starts with programs like that. And I wanted to, if I can, just spend a minute on the master's degree subject in a little different way. One of the things our company, I think, has been pretty forward thinking about is evaluating, do we or do we not actually need four-year degrees for some of the positions we have?
Right, exactly.
And we've said, no, we don't. And in a lot of cases, in a lot of organizations, it becomes a check-the-box exercise. Four-year degree, check. You don't even talk much further about, hey, is that degree relevant or not, right? They have it, let's move on. So we started an apprenticeship program where we're taking kids who might not have ordinarily made it to college at all, giving them jobs, putting them through a 2-year degree program, and then giving them full-time employment after college. And so that's another way that we're trying to bring new, diverse talent into our business and really see if we can grow that, because it's going to be a combination of growing our own talent, finding what we can in the open market, but it's going to take all the above to fill our needs over the next decade.
Do you all agree and feel like job fairs are a valuable place to go and look for employment? Amy, you're...
I think the market is so competitive right now that you can't rule out any of the traditional methods, right? If we did not go to any of the job fairs at the 80 plus universities we recruited at, we probably wouldn't fill every job. Are we banking on that in the same way? No. And I think events like that are less about resume exchange and actually finding the person you're going to hire, and more about talent brand and talent awareness. And when enrollment is lower and the talent pool is so tight, the students who do have 4-year degrees are still qualified candidates, right? Because we're all reevaluating what the workforce needs to look like doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to hire them. And the reality is they have more options than they've ever had before, and they're probably more heavily recruited. And so job fairs, things like that, are just as much about employer brand and talent brand and awareness as it is actual hiring.
And what about events for the employees that are already employed? Do they sometimes feel like, you're spending so much on people that don't work here, and I've been here for 15 years, and how do you work with that? Do you have like Friday afternoon cake days, or do you have special, especially if you don't have an office where people are working from home? So how do you guys work with that?
We definitely get, sorry, I keep doing this. We get a bit of that at VML. We invest so much in our internship program. It's phenomenal. We have way more applicants every year than we can even take in. Huge kind of brand recognition among that audience. And then we do get existing employees saying, where's that same level of investment in the kinds of things that we want to learn? And that's been, one of the things that we've really focused on with my team is creating what stood out in the internship program was that it was so experiential. And the interns were given opportunity to kind of take risks and experiment in new ways. And I think, existing employees aren't given the green space to function in that way. So we've started creating a little bit more of that kind of opportunity. So for instance, one of the ways that my department has really scaled learning experiences is instead of us delivering and facilitating workshops and those kinds of things ourselves, we've crowdsourced it, and we've put we have amazing talent and experts and masterminds across our business. We put them on the stage, and so we started a program called Learnfluencers. And these are folks that are really passionate about their area of expertise, want to share it with others. My team takes on the whole production and sort of the dirty work, and we give them the limelight. And that's been a really great way for those folks to grow outside of the confines of their job description, and almost give them an intern-like experience in a new kind of way as an existing employee.
Okay. Brian, talk about the significance of upskilling and reskilling in management talent, scarcity, the need to integrate workforce planning into your operations, and how does that work?
Yeah, that's a lot. So, I'll sort of build where we left off on that last question. So, the skills building never stops, right? From the time of hire right through. We always expect professional development to continue, and we need to facilitate that. So we do all the things that you expect a large company to do. We have tuition reimbursement programs. We'll help you get your college degree. We'll help you get your master's degree, provided it's relevant to the field, right? And we have a variety of really high-end leadership development programs. We partner with firms like McKinsey and others to deliver those. So that's a part of constant development. But we think about that entire employee life cycle over skills development. The skills you need to be successful in the role you're in today, the skills you'll need in a year, the skills you'll need in 3 years, the skills you'll need to get where you'd like to go in your career, and the skills you can take with you. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of dialogue that we have continuously. And it's all about, finding people that have the right DNA to excel in these roles, and then giving them the tools and experiences and training and development opportunities they need to actually get there. So I don't know if that got to your whole question.
Yeah, I think
that's
so.
That's a good start.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Toni, what happens when your pipeline of qualified workers from the higher education pipeline is slowing down, like we referred to? Do you have super creative ways of getting new employees in?
Yeah, great question. So I think in this day and age, we have to be very innovative in the way that we're managing our workforce talent pipelines. Generally speaking, we talked a little bit about career fairs. Is that going to be the supplementation to be able to support our workforce? The answer is going to be not necessarily yes, right? It's going to be more like a lean towards the no. And then I would also suggest that because of our workforce skill changing, we have AI on the thrust of entering into all of our workforce. The skills that we're going to be needing going forward are definitely looking different than what they did yesterday and even today. So in terms of looking at where do we attempt to find our talent, we're going back to the basic 101 and looking at our competitors and saying, okay, do we kind of solicit them, right? Traditional executive recruiter or headhunter will do that, and they continue to do that. In addition to that, career fairs, yes, they'll still stay in tune. We have open walk-in Wednesdays in Edwards is a manufacturing organization, so 75% of our workforce is frontline employees. So how do we actually attract that talent? We have walk-in Wednesdays to try to attract those individuals who are kind of hitting the ground and wanting an immediate gratification of trying to find an opportunity. For the executive and mid-tier, or those in the organization, you have to look at different ways of how do you attract the talent, because there's segmentations around the talent that are definitely different. If you're going to lean into a CEO or an executive vice president, you're going to have a different attraction towards talent than you would if it's a mid-tier manager. Likewise, frontline employees, we're not going to be finding them by way of headhunting. We're going to have to look at that in a different way. Volume is what we're looking at, because technically at the end of the day, we just don't have enough resources to support. And generally speaking, if I'm looking at, I'm talking about Brian's skill and reskilling question, I think that our company, Edwards, is really strongly tied to a learning culture. So we're really empowering our employees, and we don't go and tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, how about? But we expect them to self-serve, go into our platforms. We have virtual platforms, we have external platforms, we have conferences they can go to. Look, if somebody wanted to go and end up taking a guitar lesson, we'll pay for that. I mean, we're very open to the empowerment of continuous learning. And that continuous learning journey is going to help them empower themselves by way of additional skill set to be able to supplement our needs within the actual workforce.
Okay. What happens, I was going to say, hang on a second. Oh, this is it. What happens when you're having the opposite of the great resignation and you have employees that are holding on and maybe exceeding their expiration date or whatever? How do you deal with that? And also, you want to make room for innovation and younger people or more, that have different skills that they can bring to your company. So how do you deal with that? Anybody can take it.
I'll start with that one if I can. I mean, I think there's a couple of sides to that question, right? One is you always want to have an aggressive performance management system. That doesn't mean you need to adopt GE's famous upper out system. It didn't work everywhere it was tried. It worked at GE. It didn't work a lot of other places. But you need to be able to do that, right? But the reality is good people, great people, always have opportunities. In a down market, in an up market, they always have someplace to go. What you don't want is people hanging around that probably shouldn't be in your organization. So I would just encourage you to continue to really focus on, the right sort of performance development, help people where you can, coach them where you can, get them in the right seat. If they're not in the right seat, see if you can put them in a seat where they can really thrive and succeed and win. But I think you have to stay on top of that. And the second part of that, I think, is getting people to take risks in terms of taking other positions. And you know what? In challenging times, people all take a pause and say, hey, sounds great. You're starting a new division. Are you guys committed to that? You're going to hang on? Are you going to put the money where it needs to be? Are you going to have the staying power to see that through? And so, that may be a different conversation, but I think people, you need to sort of start by telling them, how this might help them and pick the people that you think would be interested in those things, right? It all starts with the right sort of conversations and knowing where your talent is in their development cycle and where those folks are when these opportunities arise.
So what I'd add to that, what I would add to that is that situation doesn't happen overnight, right? It's not like you wake up one day and this skill is just totally irrelevant in the marketplace. And so creating that learning culture, having the infrastructure to upskill, but also reskill, and having that performance management culture and those courageous conversations internally with people to talk about an aging skill set and a need to develop something and give them all the tools they need to be successful to embrace that, and also getting the management in place to support that, right? Because if you have an aging skill set, we want to get everything we can out of that employee while it's still revenue generating or whatever it may be. And that may be at their expense and we could lose really good people. So you have to have the culture of learning. You have to have performance management. You have to have the foresight to be thinking about identifying those aging skills that aren't going to be relevant and investing in helping people upskill or reskill. But the courageous conversations, that's a combination between the manager and the employee, and creating this time and space to allow them to do that is really where the rubber meets the road. Because otherwise you can have every program in place, but if the leadership is not making the time to support the person to reskill themselves, ultimately that's where you have a little bit more contentious, right? Offboarding of people, letting them go, feeling like they weren't set up for the right success. So taking the time, knowing it's a journey, and then setting all the right intentions.
But do you think there's also a situation where an employee is jealous of another employee because that person is learning and going up the ladder, and maybe the person that's having a hard time with it is not working as hard at advancing their own career? So do you encourage them to go for this position or try something new?
Of course. So at RSM, we talk about owning your future. And we always say that we can give you all the tools that you need to be successful, but nobody is going to care more about you and your career development than you will. So if you're not taking advantage of those tools, and we truly know that we're helping you do that, and we don't always get it right? Not every manager gets it right, but when we do, that's where you have the courageous conversation to talk about the opportunities, the missed opportunities, to lean in, and also ask people to focus on their own individual career path and their own individual skill sets. It's very easy to compare from far away without knowing what's really happening in that individual situation.
Okay.
I think
this is, go ahead, Loren.
I was just going to say, I think an important piece of the puzzle too is, people aside, organizational structure and organizational design. There's certain roles in all of our organizations that should be designed to be growth roles that are temporary, so things like chief of staff roles or phenomenal growth roles that shouldn't be bottlenecked, right? That should be seen, set the expectation at the onset. This is a growth role and you're going to be in this for 2 years and then you're going to move on. And then you don't face those scenarios where you're like, okay, this person's been in there for a while. Now we don't know how to broach the topic. Set the expectation from the beginning that there's one change that we actually made this year at my company within HR. We actually said that all kind of junior HR folks coming into the company had to start off in HR ops department to really understand the nitty gritty of HR. And so all of those roles are sort of reserved as this growth and development role before you move into more of an HR business partner kind of path. So I think by design, we could solve for a lot of that.
So I'm not sure where this settled because I was working in a building, but now I'm working from home, except for today. But where has the working from home settled? In other words, during the pandemic, a lot of things were shut down altogether. And then I started to say stations, businesses started letting them work from home. A friend of mine is a copywriter, so she easily works from home. She writes scripts all day long. So where has it settled? What percentage and how well is it received by the company if an employee says, I want to work from home? Is that a negotiation point or?
Yeah, I think we're definitely in the midst of a tug of war on this topic, and it'll be interesting to see where it nets out. If hybrid will win at the end of the day. I think a lot of folks are saying, hybrid's here to stay, and I'm like, I don't know, maybe not. We'll see who wins that power dynamic in the end. One thing that I try to tell my team, because I think some of the arguments are there's certain roles that can technically be done at home, right? I don't need to be in the office. I can technically do this. And I'm like, yeah, but we don't really advance and innovate on technicalities, right? There's certain things that we need to do to progress. And so, one of my arguments, just to always playing devil's advocate, I say to folks who present that argument, I say, what if you went home today and your partner, right, said, technically, we could do this relationship long distance. We don't have to be in the same place, right? Technically, that's true, but in your heart, you would be like, that doesn't feel right, right? That our relationship would take a different turn under those conditions than if we know that there's something to being physically together day in, day out. And same thing with, if you were to go out to your friends to a restaurant, to a bar, and it was completely empty. It was just you. It doesn't have the same energy, it doesn't have the same feel. And you may not even be talking or interacting with the other strangers there, but their presence brings an energy. And that can't be discounted. So I think that folks, what they want is the comfort and the flexibility, and I get it because we're humans and we like comfortable things. But I think that we shouldn't completely discount the effects of in-person innovation and creating and co-creating. Yeah.
Well, if they're working from home, don't check their Facebook page during the day.
Yeah. It's interesting because it is.
But has that worked for the companies
that
here?
Right.
Has it worked with your employees working from home?
I think it's a tug of war, right? So I think that she said it perfectly. I think that we'll see how it nets out, but there is this component of hybrid that I think is working for us. We have 3 days in office, 2 days remote. And it gives you the right amount of flexibility for our associates as we think about the fact that it gives them flexibility on Mondays and Fridays to work from home and not deal with the traffic that is Miami,
Sure.
because most of us experience that day in, day out. But then you have those 3 days in office where it allows for the collaboration, it allows for the innovation, allows for in-person meetings, because to your point, that's such a crucial part of how we think about how we grow businesses and how we innovate and how we think about things. There's only so much you can do on a Zoom call, right? There's a very special thing that happens when people are in person.
Yeah, so I'll interject here a little bit too. So as I mentioned earlier, my role is really around talent acquisition, right? So what had happened as a result of COVID with the advent of most working from home is it really expanded our backyard in terms of talent availability. It's no longer just those individuals that are right local to your actual brick and mortar. And so the opportunity to look at talent beyond what we see right next door to us really expanded exponentially. So I think from a talent acquisition perspective, I think that we're going to see a little bit of a flex about being agile and flexible around what does that look like for specific roles. I also earlier mentioned that our company is specifically a manufacturer, so the luxury of working from home doesn't sit within the manufacturing environment,
Okay,
right? So the frontline workers never had that luxury, and therefore they are physically in the actual brick and mortar all day, every day. You know, sometimes 24/7 and then 3 different shifts oftentimes. So I think it's going to be flexible and agile depending upon your organization. I think hybrid's going to have to be here to stay. I think that what we found through COVID is that there's a proof in concept that we can do our work from home, right? Mm-hmm. And now employers are saying, no, we want you back in the office, right? So where's the happy medium between that? And I think that we have to recognize what the employees are asking for. And I can tell you, many open opportunities, if it's not remote, that individual's gone. They don't want to consider it. So in order to be somewhat competitive in the landscape, we're going to have to be flexible in how we're addressing whether it's going to be a hard fit, you know, what you have to be on site, or if it can be hybrid. Yeah, that's what we're seeing, at least and we're a global organization. This is not just US, this is across the globe.
Yeah, you said that a minute ago, that you have the whole world where you can look for help in your business. But that must make the local person trying out for the job a little insecure about that, if they really thought about it.
I don't know if it's insecure. It actually is an opportunity for growth mobility within the organization, to be honest with you. So, and in our organization, we're one of 43 different companies underneath our mother company. So from a career pathing opportunity, there's a plethora of opportunities once you get the foot in the door. So I don't see it as a negative. I actually see it as a positive, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. What is the best way for someone to handle coming in for an interview? Is there a skill that you could recommend, or you could give them advice about what to do when they're coming in? And obviously, if they live out of town, they might fly in for a visit, but someone coming in for an interview for a job, what's the best advice, Loren?
Ooh, the best advice for the interviewee.
Correct.
I was gonna give advice for the interviewers. I think focusing on, presenting a version of you that shows how you are going to obviously add value. I think a lot of folks are venturing into spaces without having put in the time to build the credibility and the knowledge and the foundation to be that thing. We want to skip that part of career growth and just be the consultant, or be that, right? And it's like, no, you have to earn that knowledge. So a lot of folks I'm finding are presenting themselves for roles and things that maybe they're not ready for. So showing explicitly how you're ready to take on that challenge in a unique way is, obviously a
okay. Jackie?
Yeah, I think when I think of my advice for an interviewee is that there's so many choices, right? And I think there's something to be said for right fit and right place, right time. And I think that just as much as they're interviewing you for your skill set, right, you're also interviewing the organization and understanding if you're going to be a good fit for the organization. Because I think that there's a lot of times where folks come in and, we're interviewing them and they're not asking enough questions. And I think that it's an opportunity for those candidates to interview us just as much, because when that dynamic just clicks, it's a beautiful thing, but there's moments in time where it's not. And so, in today's day and age, it's important to, for both of us as an employer and an employee to make sure that it's the right fit.
If somebody comes in and they're inappropriate for the position, do you cut the interview short, or do you know right away, or do you try to get them to turn around and, hey, we can train you?
I try to give everybody a shot. That's just who I
Good.
am. Because the other thing that I think about is that just because you're interviewing for one position, it doesn't mean that you may not be a good fit for another
Sure.
position, right? So, I think that it's important to be respectful in interviews because it's part of our brand. And you never want a candidate, whether they're qualified for the position or not, to walk away feeling that, your employer is not a great place to work.
Right. Toni, you were smiling here. I thought you might have a contribution.
Well, Jackie answered it effectively, right? But so what I would say is that you give due respect to a candidate. They're putting the time aside to meet with you, and sometimes I've twisted the actual conversation to make suggestions about other opportunities they may be wanting to consider due to the fact that this might not be the right fit. Because maybe they didn't have the right skill set, but did you ever think of, and that's a big reward because in some ways they never did think of some other alternative opportunity. So in my view, I think that every person you touch is part of your employee brand, and every individual that walks away from that discussion should feel like they're going to be in contention for that job. That is basic 101 in our world, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. But I think I'll answer the question around a recommendation of what you would do for a candidate. I think you should bring your authentic self to the interview and also look at the company and verify whether in fact the culture, the values that the organization stands for resonates with your own. Because that's going to help you to understand whether it's going to be a good fit long term.
Right, exactly.
Not only just for the company, but for you as well.
Amy, you want to give some advice?
Well, that's my number one advice. I'm a recovering recruiter of 12 years. I normally say never leaves your blood, but my number one piece of advice is always be your authentic self. Interview ready, but your authentic self in that the whole person comes to work. And you don't want an employer who's only going to hire you for who you are on your very best day, because you're going to show up to work on your worst days too, hopefully, right? And the reality is the whole person comes to work and you don't get to leave everything in life at the door. And so you need to be able to be your authentic self. And if you're not, and you feel like you're not able to be that person at the organization, then once you're there, that's when you feel like it's not a right fit. And that is culture and value sometimes, but it's really about how you show up, and nobody can teach you or tell you how to show up more than what you can control individually. So I always tell people, be authentic. Don't show up like a hot mess, right? Like you want to get the job, but know that you have to be able to show up on those worst days too. And if you're painting a totally different picture that you can't feel comfortable walking in the door when life is hard, then you probably didn't set yourself up for success.
Brian, you want to chime in?
Yeah, it feels like piling on at this point because I'm well covered.
Well,
but,
they have good advice.
No, I would just say be prepared, right? I mean, that's not a silver bullet. Everyone out here probably knows that, but I think it's really important, right? It says a lot about who you are as a person. You come into an organization like ours, we're a large, complicated organization. I don't expect you to know everything. I don't expect you to know half the things, but I do expect you to have questions and know something. So spend the time on preparation, be ready for that discussion, because it says a lot about how you're going to do your job from that day forward. Are you going to walk into clients unprepared? Are you going to not be ready for the next meeting, right? Just be prepared and be ready to have a good discussion with some good give and take. That's the best thing I'd say. Okay, that sounds great. The celebrated Wharton economist Adam Grant has a new book out on finding hidden potential in people. So we'll go from Loren this way. How do you each look for people in terms of who they might become? I think we touched on it, but with the right opportunities and support. So somebody, maybe they're not necessarily qualified on day one, but by then they're up and running. You can see that in somebody, right?
Yeah, I think that there's ways to spot out potential, and I think specifically looking out for things that you can't train, right? Because I think a lot of the things that we throw on a job description when we're recruiting are things that you can just teach, right? Like I recently, in my team, because of the way we're structured and what we're delivering, I don't have very many traditional HR folks. I have tech, I have someone, a creative, I have human-centered design folks. And my thinking was, okay, they're going to join the people team, they're going to be in HR, but it's not rocket science. Like they can learn that stuff, right? So you hire based on the potential to learn those things. Do they seem quick and agile and that they'll get it, and hire for the things that you really can't train for. And human qualities, things like empathy, creativity, right? Those things are just kind of more innate. I mean, you can grow them, but they're more innate. So hiring for those kinds of things and use those as markers of potential.
Okay, Jackie?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of different ways that we could answer this and you could think about it. I think you brought up some really great points. I think that, understanding what the associate brings to the table, and then how do you create just different journeys for those associates, because a journey for one associate may look completely different for a journey for another associate. So how do you have really great communication as an organization is huge, because I think that you have to be able to communicate what's the art of what's possible in a career path and in a journey. And I think a lot of organizations have not figured that out yet, is how do you really create, through organizational design, career paths that make sense, that give opportunity from the time that you start, all the way to how you want to branch out in maybe 4 different ways, right? So internship is a super great way to start your career with an organization, but then what's next for me? So it's really about those feedback conversations with managers. How do we help managers be their best version of themselves so that they can mentor associates and help them along their journey that may look completely different from year 1 to year 7, right? So it's how you create those moments that matter and give them the ability to be able to go into different paths that make sense for them as they grow their career.
Okay, Toni?
Yeah, I would echo same sentiments, although I would also suggest that we need to meet the individuals where they're at. Right? I think that's really critical in order to help them be successful in their journey. Again, having a cultural learning is really important. They have the opportunity to seize the moment when they feel the urge to do so. We're not going to sit there and kind of force them in that mobility to say, hey, how about? But we are there to support as far as making learning accessible. And I'll tell you one example of what we're doing in order to give opportunities to internal employees. So generally speaking, we talked about stretch opportunities. Probably years ago, we would hear that. Today, we actually are looking at how do we build our workforce to look at additional skill set that they may not have to come to work every day and identify or showcase. So one example is being able to pull together gigs, which would normally go out to a consulting firm. Instead of going out to the consulting firm, making those opportunities available to the workforce internally and allowing them the opportunity to take perhaps maybe 24% of their actual normal daily work and divert that over to the actual gig work. That gives them the opportunity to expand their skill set, but also maintain their footing in their old position or their current position.
Okay.
And that's working very successfully.
All right, well, we only have about a minute left. Amy, if you want to answer that, and Brian as well.
Sure. My motto has always been hire for attitude and train to retain. Loren, much like you said, focus on the things that you can't train. You can't train passion. You can't train somebody to really care deeply about what they do. So look for the attitude, the way they show up, how they act in the tough moments, how they take critical feedback, and then figure out what you can train. And for me, that has worked several times in my career in terms of identifying people's potential before they were quite there.
Okay, Brian?
So I think that's been well covered. So I'm going to take this in a little different direction with the last few seconds here. I would challenge all of you as leaders in your organization to really think long and hard about what your organization says it values versus what they actually value. And here's what I mean by that. I've worked with a lot of global organizations where they say, hey, if you want to be in executive leadership, an international rotation is very important. Then you go back and you look at all the HRS data over the years and you see how people have moved through the organization and you find out it didn't matter one bit. I've worked with other organizations, a large global software company where everyone knew intuitively that if you didn't come up through the sales organization, you were not getting an executive leadership job. So I would say think long and hard about what really matters in your organization in terms of moving people along and developing people. What do you really value? What do they really need to be successful, and how do you help them get there? Reframe that entire discussion, that entire conversation, and I think you're going to get a better results. I just challenge you to think about that. It's been a pleasure to be here today.
Boy, what a great panel. Give them a great hand. Loren, Jackie, Toni, Amy, and Brian, the smartest panel that I've ever worked with. My name is Joe Johnson. Thanks for coming today. We appreciate you so much.